Fellas, I'm going to be ranking every single fighter currently on the pound-for-pound list out of 10 based on how skilled they are or just how good they are overall as a fighter. I don't really want it to be based off legacy or anything like that because, again, it's not a greatest of all-time list. It's just a pound-for-pound list. And I'm doing it because I feel like the pound-for-pound list, it's quite a controversial list in the sense that a lot of people disagree with the placements. Me, personally, I have a few placements that I disagree with, and you'll see that it's not like a congruent rating. So, for example, there might be a fighter that's ranked higher than another fighter, but they may be, well, I might rate them lower than that fighter. So you'll see that it's not exactly congruent. But the first fighter on the pound-for-pound list, or the pound-for-pound number one, is Islan Makev. Now, I give him a 9 out of 10. He's not perfect. He's not a 9.5. He's not a 10. But Islan Makev right now is the most skilled fighter in the UFC. He is the best fighter currently in the UFC, and I think his performances say all. Knocking out strikers in Volkanovski, submitting insane grapplers like Charles Oliveira. Islan Makev, it's almost as if you've made a fighter in a lab and made him tick all of the boxes. He's super dangerous. He's an S-tier grappler. He's an A-tier striker. He's improved his striking so much. The reason he's not a 9.5 or even a 10, which would be crazy if he was, but the reason he's not is because he has shown that he's beatable before. He just about beat Volkanovski the first time around, and he has been knocked out cold before in the UFC, so it's not like he's completely, unbeatable. He has lost before. His durability, his chin, and just his recovery, there might be a few questions there, but overall, a solid fighter. 9 out of 10. He masters nearly every single martial art, and I think Islan Makev is going to reign the lightweight division, and I think it's the correct decision to put Islan Makev as the pound-for-pound number one. Super dangerous, and he's just, every aspect of MMA, he ticks every box of it. So I'm giving Islan Makev a 9 out of 10. Next, we've got Jon Jones, and I'm giving him an 8.5. Now, there's definitely going to be a few people in the comments complaining about the fact that, oh, Jon Jones is the greatest of all time. How dare you put him lower than Islan Makev? But again, we're talking about the pound-for-pound best, not the greatest of all time. Jon Jones, I mean, let's talk about the positives. I mean, he is undefeated. He's never lost a fight before. So, I mean, that's definitely something. Again, I don't really want to talk about legacy too much, but he hasn't actually been beaten in the octagon. He's got some of the best fight IQ ever, and he utilizes his weapons so easy. Again, he's one of those fighters that beats you at your own game. If you're an insane grappler, he'll put you to sleep. If you're an insane striker, he'll outstrike you. He's good everywhere. He's an amazing wrestler. He's great at utilizing his kicks and his elbows. The places where he lacks is, first of all, his boxing. His boxing, he's never really had insane power in his hands, and he's never really had amazing boxing as Jon Jones. It's mainly just been using it to kind of, use his range correctly so he can set up elbows and knees and clinches. So his boxing itself hasn't been great, and he has shown again that he's very beatable. There's a very, very questionable win over Dominic Reyes, where a lot of people, including myself, thought Dominic Reyes won the fight. I guess you can even count the first Alexander Gustafsson fight as well. So Jon Jones, overall though, 8.5. Super skilled. And even though right now he's old and he's probably not the best in the division, I mean, he isn't. Aspinall would beat him. But you've got to give him credit. He's definitely very, very skilled. And, I mean, that is why he's the greatest of all time. That is why he's been able to build this legacy of being the greatest of all time. Beats people at their own game. And again, on top of the negatives, though, he has popped for steroids as well, which I guess you can take away. And I know you're going to say everyone's on steroids, but he's actually popped for it on multiple occasions as well. So, 8.5. Solid rating for Jon Jones. Next on the pound-for-pound list, we've got Alexander Volkanovski. I'm also giving him an 8.5. Now, the reason I'm giving an 8.5 is because he is the best of an extremely competitive division. The featherweight division has so many killers in it, and Volkanovski's just made it look easy. And it's not like he's scraping wins over these featherweights. People like Holloway, Yair Rodriguez, he's going out there and battering them. It's not like he just scrapes a decision. He'll go out there and beat the shit out of all of these featherweights, like he's done with Ortega, Korean Zombie, like I said, just Holloway, even recently against Yair Rodriguez. And I'm going to make a bold statement, and there's definitely going to be a few people that disagree with this. If Volkanovski can beat Ilia Topuria, if Volkanovski can, get another defense against Ilia Topuria, and even if it's dominant, I'm going to say that Volkanovski is on par with Jose Aldo for the greatest featherweight of all time. Maybe not better, but definitely on par with Jose Aldo for being the greatest featherweight of all time, because this guy at featherweight, he's a menace. He's never lost in the featherweight division. Both of his losses have come in the lightweight division against Islam, and he has been knocked out, so he has shown that he's beatable and, arguably lost the second fight against Max Holloway. But overall, really, really well-rounded. One of the most well-rounded fighters in the UFC. He's one of the best wrestlers in the featherweight division and definitely one of the best strikers as well. And yeah, Volkanovski, One of the greatest of all time as well. Only lost to Islam in a different division. He's really well-rounded and, yeah, shaping up to be one of the greatest featherweights of all time. So Volkanovski, I'm giving him a solid 8.5 rating. Next fighter, Leon Edwards. I'm going to give him a 7.5. Now, Leon Edwards has become so much better in the past few years. I mean, we saw a few years ago he was getting rocked by people like Nate Diaz. His defense has never really, been absolutely amazing in his previously wasn't exactly amazing. He used to always struggle with pressure as well. We saw against Kamaru Usman in the rematch and what we expected to see against Colby. So he's definitely struggled with pressure, and in his earlier days of the UFC, his wrestling wasn't quite there. But recently, he's transformed into a really well-rounded fighter, landing a takedown on Colby Covington. His takedown defense is some of the best in the welterweight division, and obviously his striking, he's one of the most technical strikers in the UFC. The reason he's only a 7.5 though is because, again, I feel like he doesn't really push the pace a lot. It's very, very rare where we're going to see Leon Edwards, rock someone or, get someone hurt and then go for a finish. He mainly just outpoints people. He doesn't have that same danger factor that a guy like Islan Makev has. Obviously, he did land the iconic head kick knockout over Kamaru Usman, but apart from that, he's not one of these fighters that are going to push the pace. He doesn't really seem to have too much killer instinct, but he's become really well-rounded. And if we see this again from Leon Edwards, if we see this against people like Belal Muhammad and Shavkat and a couple of other these welterweight contenders, I might even move him up to an 8 or an 8.5, but he's only just become champion and he's got a defense on his name only, so... Oh no, that's 2 defenses on his name, the Usman and the Covington one. But yeah, 7.5 for Leon Edwards for me. Solid fighter, but I need to see a little bit more from him before I'm moving up. Before, obviously I'm moving higher on the list because he's shown that he's beatable before. Next fighter, we got Alex Pereira. I'm giving him a 7. Yeah, Pereira is... I mean, he's not in one of the most competitive divisions in the UFC. He's in the light heavyweight division, and it's not that competitive. But I'll give him props. He's one of the best strikers in the UFC. He's definitely one of the best strikers in the UFC, and that's kind of why he's a 7. I mean, to get a belt in 2 different weight classes, first of all, you've got to give him credit for that. Only lost once in the UFC to Adesanya. He has shown that he's beatable. Obviously, like I just said, he has been knocked out before, but the main reason is a 7. I don't really want to give Alex Pereira above a 7 when he's had so many grappling problems before. In nearly every single one of his title fights, he's had problems with grappling. Even in his first few fights in the UFC, he was having issues with grappling. I mean, he's been taken down, and these aren't even like, these amazing wrestlers or these, not college wrestlers, but what I'm trying to say. These aren't these absolutely amazing grapplers or wrestlers in the UFC that are taking him down. These are just strikers with a basic knowledge of grappling, like Adesanya and Yuri Prochaska's a high-level grappler, but Jan Blachowicz as well. He's had to deal with grappling in nearly every single one of his fights, and he's never really looked amazing when grappling, but it is improving, obviously, with his work with Glover Teixeira, so... Overall, 7 out of 10. Amazing striker, not the best grappler, and for that reason, I can't give him above a 7. He needs to become more well-rounded for me to give him anything higher than a 7, but yeah, very vulnerable to be taken down, but overall, scary and a solid fighter as well. So I'm giving Pereira a 7. Next fighter, Charles Oliveira. I'm giving him a 7.5. Yeah, I'm putting him higher than Pereira. Yeah, Charles Oliveira, he's in a really competitive division and lightweight division. I mean, if it wasn't for Islan Makev, he would be the lightweight champion, and he'd probably be much higher on the pound-for-pound list according to the UFC. But yeah, again, he's just insane, isn't he? He's TKOing people like Chandler and Beneil Dariush, submitting people like Justin Gaethje and Poirier. He's only lost recently to Islan Makev, which isn't a shame because Islan Makachev's the pound-for-pound #1. He's amazing pretty much everywhere. Now, the reason he's a 7.5 and not higher is because he has struggled in a lot of his fights. And what I mean by that, he got dropped by Poirier a few times. He got dropped by Gaethje. He nearly got finished by Michael Chandler. And obviously, he's just been finished. Well, not just been, but he got finished by Islan Makev. And on top of that, when it comes to well-rounded, his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the best in the UFC. I'll give him that. He's got the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the UFC, and his Thai boxing is amazing as well. But his wrestling, his offensive wrestling, isn't exactly there. We never really get to see Charles Oliveira with any offensive wrestling. It's mainly he'll rock someone and get them close to finishing them, and then that's where he'll jump in for the submission. But I'll give him a 7.5. Overall, solid fighter, and he would be the best lightweight in the world. I mean, his lightweight resume is already amazing, and he would be the best lightweight in the world right now if Islan Makev didn't exist. I'll give him a 7.5 though. Super well-rounded. Next fighter, Sean O'Malley, I'm giving him a 7. Yeah, Sean O'Malley, again, one of those fighters that tick the boxes everywhere. He's a dangerous striker with great finishing ability, coming off a knockout win over Aljo, and he's the champion in the most competitive division in the UFC. It's not like he's a champion in like the light heavyweight division or anything like that. He's a champion in the bantamweight division, one of the most competitive in the UFC. He's got wins over Yan and Aljo, and people said they were going to maul him. Granted, the Yan fight was very controversial. A lot of people didn't think he won that fight, but at the end of the day, it doesn't take away what his skills are in the octagon. He's an amazing striker, and he's got great takedown defense as well. His takedown defense is amazing as well as Sean O'Malley. He's got some of the best takedown defense in the UFC. The reason he's only a 7 though and he's not higher is because, again, I need to see more from him. He's not even had a defense yet. He's only just won the belt. I need to see O'Malley against these top level guys like Marab or Cejudo or Sandhagen to really make a judgment on how good Sean O'Malley is. It's all good getting a controversial win over Yan and knocking out Aljo, and to be honest, I think he deserves the 7 rating, but if we see more from him, that could definitely bump him up to a 7.5 or an 8, again, because he's in one of the most competitive divisions in the UFC. So Sean O'Malley, I'll give him a 7. Next fighter, we got Drakkar Klose. I'm also giving him a 7. Now, a lot of people are probably going to disagree with this and say that he's lower, but I don't think his style is as bad as people make it out to be. I think it's just different, because it can't be bad if it's working. I mean, he's managed to become the champion from it. And he's finished Robert Whittaker, one of the best in the middleweight division. He beat Sean Strickland by decision, and I want to highlight on the by decision, because so many people said if he gets past the 3rd round that he hasn't finished Sean Strickland, he's finished, and he was able to beat Strickland by decision. Now, the reason he's a 7, and I would never give him anything higher than a 7 just yet, is because although he's well-rounded and he's dangerous and he ticks all the boxes martial arts-wise, his attributes, he's always had suspicious cardio. He nearly got beaten by Darren Till and Derek Brunson and Brad Tavares. He was so close to losing to Sean Strickland as well. The only recent win where he's looked pretty much flawless is the Robert Whittaker win. He has looked like he's struggled in every single one of his fights, but he's got amazing wrestling. He hits like a truck as well, one of the hardest hitters in the middleweight division. His striking's definitely improving, and he's got so much heart. So for Drakkar Klose, I'll give him a 7. If we start seeing him beat guys like Adesanya or maybe even like a Cannonier or Chimaev, I might even move that to a 7.5. But right now, I think 7's the good option for him. Really well-rounded, but he has looked suspicious in a lot of his fights, so I'll give him a 7. Next fighter, Pantoja. Now, I do think Pantoja should be higher than Drakkar on the list. I think the only reason he isn't is because he's in the flyweight division and not a lot of people really take interest in that division. But I'm giving Pantoja a 7.5. Yeah, so much heart has Pantoja got. He's got so much heart. Hits like a truck as well. He's one of the hardest hitters in the flyweight division, and he's also a great submission artist. I mean, beating a guy like Brandon Moreno not once but 3 times, and it's kind of a very similar situation to Charles Oliveira in Islam, whereas if it wasn't for what's his name, Pantoja, then Moreno would be the champion, because Moreno's that good. Or maybe he's probably better comparable to Volkanovski and Holloway. And Moreno's better than everyone but Pantoja, and that's just how it is, really. But yeah, Pantoja, super skilled. His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is probably the best in the flyweight division right now. He's got amazing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu offense, and he's so great at using his grappling against these strikers. And even on the feet, he might not be the best technically, but he's improving his striking, and he does hit very hard, and he makes his striking effective, does Pantoja. But the reason he's only a 7.5 is, again, I need to see him against more styles. Although he is kind of owning the flyweight division right now, I need to see him against other people like maybe an Amir Albazi or just other styles in the flyweight division, and I just need to see more of it. And again, he does tend to fade away as the fight goes on. If we see Pantoja in the 4th and the 5th round against Moreno and Royval specifically, he did look like he was starting to fade away, which isn't a problem. It's his, he hasn't had too many 5-round fights, but that's my only critique of Pantoja. But yeah, solid fighter, and I'll give him a 7.5. Then we've got Adesanya. Now, yeah, he's an 8 out of 10. He's a lot higher than a lot of people on this list, and he's quite low on the pound-for-pound list. But listen, say what you want about Adesanya, opinions aside, he's one of the best strikers to grace the UFC. He's got solid takedown defense, and this guy owned the middleweight division. Now, was the middleweight division one of the most competitive in the UFC? No, it wasn't. When Adesanya was around, his title defenses were against guys like Marvin Vettori, and you know, Paulo Costa. So it's not one of the most competitive divisions in the UFC, but Adesanya as a fighter, he's super skilled. He's got absolutely amazing striking. I know he might have been outstruck by Sean Strickland, but look at all these other fights where he's picking people apart. The fight against Costa, knocking out Alex Pereira. His striking's amazing. One of the best in the UFC, one of the best strikers of all time. And his takedown defense, again, he might have not been against the highest caliber of wrestlers, but his takedown defense has always looked pretty flawless as well as Adesanya. He's had multiple defenses, and he's kind of become, he's definitely one of the greatest middleweights of all time. I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. He's a very, very solid fighter. Again, there are a few styles that doesn't work in his favour. He has lost to Jan Blachowicz at light heavyweight, which shows that he's not, you know, he can't be the pound-for-pound best if he lost in a different division to Jan Blachowicz, and obviously he's been beaten by Alex Pereira in the UFC. He's lost to Sean Strickland in the UFC, so they've shown that he's very, very beatable on multiple occasions, but overall, solid fighter. So yeah, that is my rating of every pound-for-pound fighter in the UFC, in the top 10 at least. Let me know if you agree, or if you change